Welcome back to Killing Them Softly. I'm your host, Angela Huguenin. Our topic for this episode is late-term abortion. What actually constitutes a late-term abortion, and how often do they happen? And what are the reasons that women really decide to terminate later in their pregnancy? And how safe is it really? Tonight, we are going to hear from former abortion workers who worked at clinics that specialize in late-term abortion, meaning abortions that are in the second and third trimesters. According to the government agency, the Centers for Disease Control, there are more than 70,000 second and even third trimester abortions being performed every year. Abortion advocates tout messages that support the notion that these late-term abortions only happen for reasons of fetal abnormalities or to save the life of the mother. But tonight, we will hear from 3 former abortion workers who say that between 95 and 99% of these late-term abortions that they witnessed were out of convenience. They will share about how their clinics even offered lucrative VIP packages that enticed women to pay higher prices for low-budget services. As with all of our webcasts, our former abortion workers are honest and they're transparent. They're going to talk about exactly what happens during a late-term abortion and what the risks are to women who are undergoing these procedures. One worker will share her experience of witnessing the abortion of a 30-week-old baby boy and how that experience led her to walk away from one notorious abortion clinic in the Northeast. We will also hear from another worker who witnessed rampant abuse and forced late-term abortions, as well as terminations due to the gender of the baby not being what the parents wanted. We will also hear from one worker who describes her abortion doctor holding up the body of a deceased baby with clubfoot, as if it were evidence for a logical argument in favor of late-term abortion. This conversation needs to be heard because you see, Americans, they're being lied to. They're being told that late-term abortion is exceedingly rare, that it's safe, and that babies aren't being born alive and then killed. But let's hear from those who've actually experienced what late-term abortion is like, instead of politicians who have no idea what it's like to be in the room during a procedure like this. So let's just get into this conversation. Tonight I have 3 guests with me, and we're going to ask them about their experiences. So first, my guest tonight is Noemi. Noemi worked in a private facility for approximately 6 years. Noemi, welcome to the webinar.
Hi, everybody. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Noemi, I just want to ask you a couple of questions in regards to your experience at your clinic. This was a private clinic in Florida, is that correct?
Yes.
And you worked as a nurse in that clinic, is that also correct?
Yes, I was hired as the recovery room nurse.
Can you tell us, Noemi, what really constitutes a late-term abortion? And what does that procedure look like?
So, for all pregnancies, the terms first stage, second stage, and third stage, first trimester, second trimester, and third trimester, are dating, calendar dating. So, for the first 12 weeks, up until 11 weeks is considered first trimester. From 12 up, it's second trimester. And then once it hits the 20s, it goes into the third trimester. And the reason for that is obviously because care has to be given specifically at each stage differently. So, because the baby is bigger. So, second trimester abortions is anything after the 11 weeks, theoretically. And so what happens is once it gets to a second trimester, it is a multiple day procedure, 2 to 3 days, can lead up to 4 days because we are laboring out a complete whole baby. And so it requires day 1 some medication to be able to stop the heartbeat of the baby. Day 2 and day 3 is when we're giving other medications so that we can induce labor. So we're forcing the person to go through the labor pains to labor out a baby. If that doesn't work, then we end up suctioning out a baby in pieces. That's the
So
reality.
in those 3 to 4 day procedures, where is this client staying, this patient? Are they staying at the hospital? Are they going home and then coming back? What does that look like?
So a lot of our procedures were from out of state and even the local ones. So if it was a local patient, they would go home, which is unheard of. You don't go for the beginning part of a surgery at a hospital. They administer medication, set up an IV, and then when that piece is done, they say, go home and come back in the morning. Though they admit you to the hospital so that they can monitor your vital signs and monitor the progression of the medication. Everybody's medication resistance and tolerance is different. So if they lived locally, they would just go home and come back the next day. If they were from out of state, we would set them up in what they thought was going to be a nice hotel. We had contracts with the Vista Inn and the Super 8 Motel, which subsequently now is a homeless shelter. Just to let you know the setup or the cleanliness of it. And so they would give us a deal of $39 to $49 a night, depending if we needed a bigger or a location for the person so that they didn't have to do the stairs. And that's where we would discharge them to. So they would come in, get this medication to stop the heartbeat of the baby. We don't know how they're going to react to the medication because they've never had it before. We would discharge them to this motel.
So while they're at this hotel, motel, there's no supervision medically. There's no one with them. They've
No.
been given a medication and then they're just sent off to kind of manage themselves.
Yes.
So then when they come back to the clinic the next day, you said then you just induce the labor, right?
Yes.
And have you seen any or experienced any complications at that stage or even while they've been at the hotel or have gone home? What kind of complications have come out of that?
So we would have a couple of women. Again, anyone who gets any medication will never know how fast their body is going to metabolize it. So what happens is if it's happening really quickly, the woman's body is meant to keep pregnancy in. So if we've given a medication to stop the baby's heartbeat, to end the life of the baby, and it gets metabolized really quickly, some of them, we've had patients that labored out at that hotel. And they would call us and say, hey, something just came out of me in the toilet bowl. And so we would say, okay, well, do you want me to bring it in? They would ask us, and we'd say, no. We knew exactly what it was, and we would encourage them to flush it and come back in the next day, not now, not go to an emergency room. There wasn't any physical eyes on, hands on assessment. And we would just see them the next morning. And if they showed up, they showed up. And if they didn't, well, the procedure was done. They were no longer pregnant. So goal was met. That was one
Wow.
scenario. That was somebody who labored out. And that would happen a few times because, again, we're giving this medication and sending them on their way. There was one particular woman from out of state whom she ended up losing her life. It was a multiple day procedure. She was way further along than what we were allowed to do, but we went ahead and embarked on this procedure anyways. It was a high dollar abortion. And so, we were trying to get her to labor out for 4 days, round the clock. And then she finally was able to labor out. There was a lot of bleeding. She was not stable. We purposely discharged her to the hotel, and because we didn't want anything to happen on the premises, we didn't want to have to call 911. We didn't have to alert the authorities about that. So the quicker we were able to get her out of there, and on the way out, she said, am I not pregnant anymore? And we said, yes, we're done. The procedure is done. Didn't give her any antibiotics or anything, and she lost her life at the hotel. But it wasn't our problem at that point. It was their problem.
Sure, sure. Um, is there any cutoff of gestational ages? How far did you guys take it? And if there was a legal limit in the state of Florida, did you guys exceed that at any time?
Absolutely. At that point, the legal limit was 23 weeks and 6 days. So just under the cusp of 24 weeks. We exceeded that all the time. Easy to manipulate. That dating was based on an ultrasound. So what happens is during ultrasound, which were not performed by ultrasound techs, no one was certified. This was hands-on. I have been a nurse for a long time. I have all the accreditation for nursing. I have not taken one single course in sonography other than the hands-on experience I received there from somebody who's never been certified as a sonographer either. So it was the blind leading the blind. But we would maneuver and change the calipers, the markers, so that it appeared to be a pregnancy within the guidelines. So on paper, it appeared that we were doing just under 24 weeks, so we could not get in trouble. But we were embarking on removing a huge baby from this woman's body because 24 weeks to 27 weeks is a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. My next guest, Sonia, I just want to ask you, you worked in a private facility in Texas for about 5 years. Is that correct?
Yes, a little bit more than that, but yeah, yes.
And did you also have some of these same similar experiences? Were the procedures done similar? Did you send people away and then bring them back the next day?
We did, but the way that Naomi is describing it, I'm like, wow, ours was pure. I mean, it was torture. I'm assuming, anyways, for the baby. But the way we did it, it wasn't. There was no medication inserted to stop the heartbeat. You know, they came in for 2 day, 3 day procedure, and we would just insert the laminaria. They would come back and the next day, and if they weren't ready, he would insert some more, and then come back the third day, and that's when he would attempt to basically just tear it out or just start pushing and make it, pull the baby out because she was pure dilated. And just the only one that would receive some kind of sedation was the patient, was the mom, through lidocaine and maybe like a sedative, you know, through her veins, which they would not fall asleep, but nothing towards the baby because that was pure straight up pulling them out piece by piece, or the whole body would come out, and just the head would be stabbed because he would stab it with the dilator.
How far gestationally did your doctor provide these procedures?
At that time, I believe it was like 23 something weeks. I mean, it's been a while. I can't remember. But it was a second. We went up to 3 day procedures, and they looked very much pregnant. And I'm sure that we did further along than they were.
Sure.
Because again, like Naomi was saying, we can manipulate the ultrasound and make it seem like it was less when it was actually more. And would still charge them a whole lot more, because knowing, they weren't going to question it. They were there to get that procedure done for whatever reason, that they wanted, they wanted that done and set.
Absolutely. Adrian, I just want to talk to you for a minute as well. Adrian worked for a private facility in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. You were there for a little over 3 years. You had one in particular experience that you spoke with me about earlier, in which a 30-week-old baby was born, and it was placed in a baking dish, and you were able to take a picture of that baby. That is something that impacted you very deeply. Can you share a little bit about that experience?
Yes. Well, thank you for having me.
Yes.
Yeah. So basically, I was my routine. I've always called to see how many we had for the day. It was mainly for, preparation for my mental state. And, I was told that he was 29. It was a 29.4 weeker. I didn't believe it. But when I came in and when I started my routine, as I went to, I saw the mother first. She was 17, and she was really, small frame. But she was 17 and she was sleeping. And then, when I went upstairs to take care of some things, I come back down And with no warning, he was, at my station. He was very, very big, very huge. Um, and he looked like he was sleeping peacefully. And they put him in a Pyrex baking dish, and it was too small for him. And that it broke my heart. It broke my heart because in my heart, in my mind, he did have a chance. I'm sure all babies had a chance, but this particular one really hit me. And I was so heartbroken. And I remember when Gosnell came running in, pretty much like he came in early. He never comes in early. And all he could say was, the aunt felt that it was best for her. Um, and I think what really got to me even more is what he took him away. And yes, he cut him up into pieces, and he stashed him in an old a gallon milk container, and put him in a freezer. And I remember before he did take him away and before he showed up, I prayed over him, and I was just telling him how sorry I was. And yeah, I took a picture, and then I put him on my site, and that's when he came and took him. But a lot of people wondered why did I take the picture, and that was my way of getting justice for him. And yeah, that really messed me up mentally. When I ended up leaving the place, I thought I was good. A weight was lifted, but mentally it wasn't. I learned I couldn't sleep at night because every time when I tried to go to bed, I would just see him standing there, and he's giving me this look like, "Why didn't you help me?" And I couldn't face him. So for about, I'll say, a year and a half, I could not sleep in the dark. I had to have some type of lighting on, and yeah, that really that messed me up.
So
All
I
that for a
definitely
couple of
want to
dollars.
I want to touch on our healing process in a little bit. But one of the things that you said a few moments ago is that this baby had a chance. We hear a lot of messages today that late term abortions are happening because there is some type of abnormality that this baby cannot survive. We hear stories about how it is a desperate situation for saving the life of the mother. But in all of these situations that the three of you have described tonight, to me, are for reasons of convenience. Noemi, can you talk a little bit about the reasons as to why these women have decided to come in later to have this abortion later in their pregnancy? At one point during our pre-interview, you also talked about the vacations, the cruise ship, and how those were, our reason, if you will, to do this late term abortion. But just give us some of the reasons why those were performed.
Absolutely. In our advocacy sessions, we would sometimes, in our humanity, want to be nosy and say, like, why are you having this abortion? And they'd give us a quick synopsis. Finances is a big one. They never would have enough money. Baby daddy issues. It's, listen, I live with one, the father is another one, or I'm not sure who the father is. One would say the complexities of life. I just am not ready. Lots of different reasons that were all tangible, because finances today may not be your finances tomorrow, or there were just so many silly reasons that were non-medically based. And then as far as the vacation packages that we used to offer, we became the go-to facility for staff on the cruise ships. So little known fact is that the staff on the cruise ships, they sign contracts that they're not fraternizing with the other and that they're not having any sexual relations. Like it's a thing on cruise ships because they're out at sea for so long. And so a pregnancy is proof that there has been sexual relations. So we started to get these ship to shore phone calls saying, if I'm there Saturday morning at 7 o'clock in the morning, can I have an abortion? But I have to be out by 12 because I have to get back to the port to be back on the ship. This is the only window that I have. And we realized there's money in this. We're going to go ahead and do this. And we would have them come over, get into a car service, come over, pretty much guaranteeing them an abortion for this amount of money. We would raise, it was never the base price. We would always, charge extra for this VIP service. And we were committed to this abortion regardless of the time frame. So in the stretch of half a day or one day, we were completing an abortion. Sometimes second trimesters that would take 1 to 2 days, but we would fast track this abortion. Didn't care that we weren't going to have communication with them. No follow up. We wouldn't even give them a prescription because how would they fill it on the ship? So they didn't even have the capability of calling us back and saying, hey, there's increased bleeding. We literally would perform this surgical procedure on this woman, send her back to this boat, and never have any contact with them ever again. So that was the VIP vacation destination package that we offered. That was literally the phrase for it.
Wow. What about forced abortions? Adrienne, I believe that you had shared with me a situation about a young woman who didn't really want to have the abortion, but her significant other, I'm not sure, I don't remember if it was a boyfriend or husband, but can you share a little bit about that situation with us as well?
Yes, there was a woman that was there. You can tell that she didn't want to get, she didn't want to have the abortion. So she kept leaving the office, and her husband, it was her husband, he kept dragging her back in. Excuse me, he kept dragging her back in. And it got to the point where I guess he got tired of chasing her, and he ended up handcuffing her to one of the poles in the bathroom. And there was nothing we could do about it. We couldn't call the cops because he was a police officer. So that was a fight that we couldn't win.
In most hospital situations, or any hospital setting, if there is someone being forced to do something against their will, aren't we mandatory reporting these incidents? Did that happen in any of your facilities?
No, in my facility, I remember I've witnessed Gosnell did a procedure. However, there was a limb that was stuck that he could not get out. And he tried and he tried. So we ended up calling the ambulance. And when they came, it was a guy and it was a female. And the guy, he was so rude and he was so nasty to Gosnell. And I was shocked because Gosnell was the type of person, if you gave him that energy as far as hollering and, being upset and being disrespectful, he will holler back. And the roar that this man had in him was insanely scary. But he did not respond. He was, very nervous, it seemed like. And, they ended up taking the woman out. But I that's the only time I've seen police come there. Like we don't call police. We don't call the ambulance. I didn't understand it then, but I sure enough understand it now.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and can I add to that, Angie? As medical professionals, we take oaths, right? That we are supposed to mandatorily report to everyone. So it's part of our day to day, but not in the abortion industry. Like, we were told the exact opposite. We're not reporting. That is not what we're doing. We're not bringing light to anything that goes on in this building. The
And there's
only
some
place,
real difficulty
yeah.
with late term because these are big babies that they're trying to forcibly remove. Um,
Even
yeah,
with pill procedures, even with the early ones, I mean, specifically with the late ones, but with any medical procedure, there's a possibility of there things going wrong, and let's take it off of the medical part of it. When you have a minor come in and they're clearly being forced for an abortion and they're clearly there with their pimp or with their abuser or something, then there is a problem.
yeah, absolutely. So these procedures are high risk, right? The later we are in the pregnancy, the more high risk comes with that. We have women who aren't necessarily wanting to do that, but are being forced or coerced or demanded that this thing happen. Um, we also are seeing that these are out of reasons for convenience. This is not something, these women are not coming in a medical emergency state saying, I need to have this child removed for my own life, my own safety. However, there are cases where there are some abnormalities. One of those cases, Sonia, you spoke with me about earlier in regards to a baby that was born with club feet. Now, this abnormality we know can be corrected. Um, However, if you'll tell our viewers a little bit about that story of the doctor using that sort of as a logical argument in favor of late term abortion.
Yeah. This lady was about 20 something weeks, I believe. And I don't think she wanted to be there either. But from her being told that there was something wrong with her baby, she was there, nothing else. So she basically just coerced to be there for whatever reason. So anyway, so when he was taking out the baby, and this is one of the ones that was not in pieces, was in full. So he took it out, and he goes, look, because I could just simply just look, because they're the way they're positioned, because I'm holding their hands and just talking to them, or hand him something if he needs something. So he just flips from the tray, he flips it like the bottom part of the baby and shows me like his feet like this, shoves it like nothing. And I look and I'm like, I didn't know what that was. And he's like, and I'm like, okay. He's like, she did the right choice, you know. And then I'm thinking, okay, you know, to me, I mean, they all, when babies are born, their feet are very fragile. So, but you could tell on this one that it was like really just like a little ball kind of crunched in. Um, and now that I had a child myself, he was born with club feet, and this child that was aborted could have had a chance, just like my child did.
Yeah.
My child had a chance to do marching band. My child had a chance to play football, basketball, everything, surgeries, you name it. And this child did not have the chance, like any other child could have, no matter the situation. We have so much technology and so much brains in this state that it could have been fixed.
Yeah,
Can I
absolutely.
can I piggyback on what Sonia said?
Yeah.
Sonia, oh my goodness, you are so right, because my daughter also was born with club feet, and yeah, it could have, this baby, her baby could have been, they cast corrective shoes, because their bones are soft. So yes, that baby definitely had a chance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my child, like, not because we're talking about my child, it's not about my child, it's about
Right.
saving the baby's lives. But
Right.
my child, his case was severe case of club feet, and he only had one surgery, had casting all, up until he was 1. So if my child was capable and able, imagine that one that just only has one clubfoot and not both.
Well, can I piggyback off of both of them? This is the piggyback
Yes,
conversation
please.
where at least, okay, it's never right. Abortion is never correct, but at least in that scenario, there was a medical reason, right? We've performed abortions on, hey, it's a boy and I want a girl. Hey, it's a girl and I want a boy. That is not legal anywhere in the, however, we're going ahead and doing that. We would perform abortions on, once they got into the 16th and the 17th weeks and they started to do some more testings. And so baseline testing, let's say there's markers for potential Down syndrome. No, I can't have a less than perfect baby. We're going to go ahead and take care of this right now. So we would do for gender reasons, we would do for potential problems. We would have some of them that said, like, yeah, this baby doesn't appear perfect on this 3D ultrasound. So yeah, we're not going to do this time around.
Yeah, I
So
think that's a great point, Noemi. And, I think even to my own situation with my daughter, her first pregnancy, there was an issue where they had these chromosomal markers, right, that could have indicated that there was an issue. And of course, the first thing that the doctor says is, well, you may want to consider just go ahead and terminate this pregnancy. And we find that a lot in the medical facility. Our society is full of um, expectations of perfection. And so when people find that they're not having that child with all 5 fingers, all 5 toes, everything is perfect, it becomes just an automatic, well, you may want to terminate, rather than talking to the patient about different options, corrective surgeries. Absolutely no one wants to see their child go through corrective surgeries for their feet and their legs, and that can be hard and difficult. But that baby has value, right? That baby has a purpose. And God doesn't create mistakes. We know that there is a purpose in all of those things. That brings me to another point um, that we had talked about in your pre-interview, where you were also very close to a cancer center. And you talked about how these doctors would talk with a woman once she's had a cancer diagnosis and then maybe later finds out that she is pregnant, or even is pregnant and has a cancer diagnosis. And it almost seems as if they were not really giving her a choice, but just automatically saying, well, then you need to go have this termination to save your own life, placing her value above the value of that child. Can you tell us a little bit about some of those experiences?
sure. And I want to start by saying it may be a little bit more justification if they were placing the value of the patient above the value of the child, but the real placement of value was on the financial gain for starting
Sure.
chemotherapy and getting the money for this cancer patient. At the end of the day, that
Mhm.
is what it's always about. Because so you have a cancer patient, the young lady was newly diagnosed, and all of the baseline testing, pregnancy tests are super important, right? Because you cannot administer chemotherapy. It's not recommended because of the damage to the baby. So they find out that the patient is pregnant. That's going to halt now this patient's care for the next 9 months. So that's finances that this facility is no longer getting, right? So
Right.
they're going to go ahead and highly recommend that they have an abortion. We were within 5 to 7 minutes of the cancer center, a prominent, well known cancer center. And so they developed a direct line of referrals with us. So they would call us and say, patient X, hey, they were just diagnosed and they're coming up at 9 weeks pregnancy. We're sending them over right away. Us as the receiving facility, we didn't care about have they had any therapy, have they had consultation for options, options counseling, nothing. We were going to take them because it's money for us. So you're
Mhm.
telling a patient who's petrified, she just found out that she has cancer and she has to embark on this mission of chemotherapy and treatment, radiation therapy. She's trusting the medical personnel in front of her to give her the best course of action, and they're saying go have an abortion. So now they're tagging them off to another medical personnel who's supposed to have her best interests at heart. And we're still not giving her any options. We're going to rush her in, VIP her, and give her an abortion. There has been lots of data. There are plenty of women who have not listened to the doctors, paused their chemotherapy, had the baby, and actually successfully had their baby. Very healthy pregnancy, very healthy baby. And it's helped the woman in the long term with the chemotherapy because of the hormonal increases in the body, and it's made them healthier during that time. But none of that is explored. It was not explored. We would get referrals constantly from the cancer center.
Well, and even thinking in the later term, like if she is already pregnant and then is diagnosed with the cancer, at this point, she's so close in that second and third trimester to go ahead and complete that pregnancy, and then start the chemo. But they were not thinking of treating both patients. They were thinking of the money. Let's go ahead and terminate, and then we can start this procedure on you. Because as you stated, that's more money in my pocket for that procedure. Um, as I've mentioned earlier tonight, all three of you worked in separate clinics, private clinics, separate states, and yet there are so many similarities in we see the operation of these clinics and how procedures are done. A couple of you actually talked even about the differences in using digoxin or not using digoxin. In your pre-interviews, you talked a little bit about the differences for requirements of death certificates, some requiring them, some not able to get them. Can you guys just talk amongst yourselves, just a little bit about some of those differences that you experienced in your clinics?
Sure. So I could tell you categorically, because we specialize in the second trimester, death certificates were not a thing. We weren't able to issue death certificates because that's acknowledging that there was a life in the stomach, in the womb of the mother. So, and because it was at the end of the day an elective procedure and the world did not view it as a life, a death certificate was never issued. So even in cases where it was a wanted pregnancy and the mom and the family came in and said, hey, we want to have some closure, can we get a death certificate? We weren't able to, it wasn't recognized by the world. There's no birth certificate, so how can there possibly be a death certificate? You have to have one before you can have the other, and it was not acknowledged as a life.
Wow. And Sonia, in your state, it was a little different. Is that correct?
We did in Texas. And I believe it was over 12 weeks. 12 weeks or over, we had to do a death certificate. And this was a long, empty sheet that we would get from the state. Every so often we would order them because we would run out. It was a long pink sheet that we had to fill in, but the client also had to sign the death certificate. But we didn't really want her to know that that's what it was. So we would put it on the papers that they had to sign, and okay, sign here, and quickly, briefly, and whatever. So she wouldn't have to see that that was a death certificate. And then we would fill it out ourselves, the rest of it, and the amount of the months that they were pregnant, who the mother was and everything. And then we would mail it out to the state of Texas and to be filed.
And that had to be kept on file at the clinic.
Yeah, we would keep a copy, and then the original copy, original paper that we had to fill out, we would send it to the state.
It's a little curious to me how one state varies so much in recognizing that life, and yet another state just does not recognize it as a life. It kind of, well, I was just going to say it kind of puts sheds a light a little bit on the division of where we are even as a nation, right? Some recognize that as a life and others do not. Go ahead with what you were.
Well, when I first had to, because we went in stages on who did what. When it was my turn to start, they started training me how to do the death certificates, fill them out, and I'm like, wait, that's when my antennas started going up, after so many. why do we have to do a death certificate if this is an abortion? It's not like they died somewhere else or they were killed somewhere else. That baby is being aborted here. And that's what I started thinking. I said, why do we have to do one? And
Yeah.
when I kind of asked the manager that one time, like, why? Like, what's, why are we doing that? She's like, oh, don't worry about it. It's something that the state requires. And that was it. She just kind of just blew it off. But then that started waking me up a little bit more and more.
Yeah, I can definitely see how that would.
Even in that process that Sonia is describing, at a medical facility, whenever there is a protocol in place, especially something that's state derived, there's explanations, there's manuals, there's reasoning, there's rationale behind it. So if anybody says, hey, why are we using this red sharps container, they're describing the importance of it, and they want to enlighten and inform all of the staff, because if there's an inspection and they ask you about this, you have to know the rationale, the reasoning behind it. Not so in an abortion clinic, because they're not run under medical guidelines. It's exactly what Sonia said. No, 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 you don't need to know. Don't worry about it. It just needs to get done. And that's it. That is just right. No, but right. Nobody's checking. It's so out of the norm for medical practice, standard medical practice that is governed by agencies.
Well, I was just going to say, in the same breath, you're saying that those protocols are not important, or they are important, but nobody's following them. So because they're
Right.
not regulated, nobody's really following up.
Right.
But at the same time, we have medical professionals in these clinics that are in such a way covering their own butt, when it comes to keeping records of those that are past the legal limit, right? And yet correcting or manipulating a sonogram picture so that if someone happens to see my record, I'm still covered, right? So it's the things that aren't really important, you don't need to know, right? But if there is something that I think could put me in jeopardy, I will make sure and correct that or manipulate it so that I am not in danger.
Well, I I learned about the manipulating of the ultrasound through one of Gosnell's people. Um, but what I didn't understand was, yeah, we had a lot of young girls come in, and they're coming in with their father, but we knew. Um, so what we were told to do when stuff like that happens, uh, Gosnell would do the procedure, but he would snip the foot off and place it in formaldehyde. And that was his way of saying, well, when the mother comes, because she's going to find out that her daughter, her underage daughter was violated, I say, because it is a violation. So it was for, just in case the mother finds out, we already have evidence. So that was his rape kits. But the underage girls that came in there, that was never reported. The guy that came in, the men that came in with them, that wasn't reported. And I will say, me personally, I was too afraid to report it, because at that clinic, the day would start at 3:30. That's when everyone, between 2:30 and 3, everyone was scheduled to come in around that time. So, you know, the people that are coming in with the patients, they see our faces, and they've seen them time and time again. But my fear was, we weren't getting out of there till 2 o'clock in the morning, and it was dark in that area, so you didn't know what was going on. So yeah, a lot was not reported. Nothing was reported.
Nothing was reported.
Nothing. Because I remember Noemi and Sonia was saying the limit of their state, our limit was 24.5. And there were a lot of 28s, 29s, 30s. There were a lot of them, but we couldn't report that.
We were more concerned with protecting our doctor than protecting our patient. So, as the sonographer, I would go in there and I would present the doctor because deniable plausibility, right? So, if I present them with a sonogram that is only 23 weeks, it is my accountability, right? And so that would help our doctors have clear conscience. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that this is a huge baby, or to see that
Right.
this is a fully developed baby. But nonetheless, that's what this. So we would knock it at this level, at the frontline level. So whenever it got to the back, it was just here. We're going to give the file to the doctor. Here's the patient, and we're moving forward. So we were more concerned with that kind of protection of ours because usually it's the nurse and the doctor, the only two licensed personnel there. So the only two licenses at risk are the nurse and the doctor. And so we did everything to cover her and back her up. And that was at the cost and the comfort and the safety of the patient, even from the authorities. We never reported anything.
The doctors that, well, excuse me, I will say the help that Gosnell had, they weren't licensed at all. At all.
I said I wasn't licensed. The only one that had a education there, a license, was the LVN in the recovery room and the doctor itself. And everybody else that was actually in the procedure room with him and doing the ultrasound and doing the lab work and doing the sort of counseling, none of them had medical education. It was just like on the job training, OJT, all the time.
Neither
Everybody
did
that would
I.
come in,
Neither did
everybody
I.
that
I
would
wasn't trained.
I would have hired
I
you
wasn't
guys in a
licensed.
minute. I would have hired you guys. I would have given you a high school diploma if you needed. We would have worked it. If you were willing to work, we would have hired you and we would have cross
Mm.
trained you
yeah, he would hire anybody, and he did not care as long as you were willing to
to work.
stick with it and be honest and faithful to him. Then he would hire you. And I was going to add to the when we're talking about the death certificates, I started picking up that nobody's watching us, nobody's making sure that we do file or who came in or anything like that. Because when the state would come in, we already knew what death certificate, what files to pick out for them because here it is. Here's our perfect file because we would correct it. So when there was one time when it was like, gosh, almost 20 death certificates, and that was my job for the week to do the death certificates. But after everything else that I did, and I'm like, I'm not staying. It was already 6 o'clock, and I'm not staying to work on death certificates. I said, can I take them home and do them? And the manager's like, sure. I took them home, never brought them back. I told my husband, burn them. The doctor was not going to check to see if we took them back or anything because all we had to do was bring them back and put them in a box, a pile of some more death certificates that the office manager would eventually mail out to the state of Texas. So there's maybe about 100 plus death certificates that I burned. I did not do them. I'm like, nobody's watching this, so why should I do all this work on top of everything else that I have to do? And I didn't do them. I burned them.
Well,
I think that's a great point too that you made there in regards to the audit, because I think that's one of those things that most lay people don't understand when you talk about an audit. They'll say, well, we get audited on a regular basis. However, in the industry that I worked in prior to coming to, and then there were none, we were audited on a regular basis, but we knew when the auditor was coming. We chose which records they were able to audit, and we scanned them to make sure that they were correct and in order before we gave it to them. So when we talk about those kinds of situations, they're able to make sure that any record that they give to an auditor or an inspector prior to they don't just show up unannounced and start digging in your files, right? They come in and they ask for the things you present to them, what you have already gone through, and ensure it is in correct operational order. So that's a great point too. And I think people just don't understand when we talk about auditing or we talk about inspections, that's how it's happening. Adrienne, what did you want to add?
but you know what, Angie? That's I never understood why the auditors would tell when they're coming.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in my in my clinic, well, they came on Wednesdays, so I wasn't allowed to come. I wasn't allowed to come, to work on Wednesdays.
Mm-hmm.
But when I would come back the next day, I'm wondering, how did it go?
Mm-hmm.
Why is it? Where's the violations? I'm not hearing. No bad news. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And once everything came out with my situation, I truly believe. I mean, you can't convince me otherwise, but I truly believe a lot of these clinics paid the state to be quiet. That's what I believe, because that's what it was in my clinic. Because when everything came out, like 7 of them quit just like that. So yeah, I believe a lot of them getting paid off to
Well,
not say anything.
I asked one time one of the auditors, because having hospital based experience and experiencing exactly what you were mentioning, Angie, at a hospital, every hospital gets a 2-month window. So there's, like your window is, June and July. You know that sometimes they're in June and July, and then come before everybody's fixing everything, and they're trying to get, but it's minor things. It's just, let's triple check the dates on the vials. Let's just make sure that we're going into this window okay. In an abortion clinic, you don't get that frame. You get, we will be there Wednesday at 10 a.m. So, I had a very clear basis of comparison. And I remember one time asking her, the auditor from ACA, I said, you scheduled this appointment. She says, girl, I don't want to be here any longer than I have to. And it hit
Mm,
me. In Spanish, there's a saying that says, eyes that don't feel, eyes that don't see, and heart that doesn't feel. So if she walks in, looks at the 25 charts we gave her, they're perfect. She can walk out, she can pass us, and that's it.
wow.
Nobody wanted to deal with what was happening behind the doors of the Purple Building. And that gave us free range to do whatever we wanted to do back there.
Mm,
Yeah,
Yeah.
we didn't get any violations or anything like that when they came once a year. Um, well, correction. It wasn't a violation. It was like a suggestion for next time for us to get a bigger freezer.
Oh.
And because our freezer was just like a regular, like a large freezer, home freezer, but refrigerator. The top was a freezer, the bottom regular top freezer. And she suggested that we get a freezer, big freezer, or get another one, or or start calling biohazard to come more frequently to pick up the ones that were in the freezer.
wow.
Man. Um, so as I'm listening to your stories, I'm listening to your experiences, I'm able to feel some of the just the emotions that are being portrayed as you're sharing some of these. Adrian, I know in your situation, the impact of the 30-week-old baby kind of was the um, if you will, the straw that broke the camel's back. That was kind of the thing that set you over the line and said, I don't think that I can do this anymore. I think you realized at that point how it was impacting your mind, body, your soul.
Yes.
Um, the story of Sonia and the doctor just flippantly pointing that baby at her again um, as if it were a logical argument in favor of this late term abortion, while the client is just, or the patient is laying there on the table without any regard. And the stories of, women that you have given too much medication to, Noemi, or that was sent off to um, this hotel, truly just to die alone. And I hear those stories, and I think, man, what an impact being in those places has made on you. um, and I know in your journey out of those facilities and your connection with And Then There Were None, you've been able to go through a process of healing. And what an opportunity that has been for you. I want each of you to take just a few moments to kind of share with our viewers about your healing journey, what it has meant for you, and what does that look like, and just the impacts that you have experienced from your time at the clinic, and how that healing looks today. Noemi, we can start with you.
That is a question that requires 5 hours, but we're going to summarize it. I mean, people ask us that. We get that question often. I like to say we'll be in recovery for the rest of our lives. I mean, we can have 5 okay months, and then there's a trigger. There is something that a smell, a sound, a behavior, an action that just takes us right back. We suffer from sleepless nights. We suffer from addictions. I mean, I want to tell you that everybody at my clinic was addicted to something: drugs, alcohol, or a combination of them. I was addicted to food, and so all of that, when we leave, we are so broken. We're just messed up to the core. And so, thanks to And Then There Were None, we can start our healing process. And, this ministry walks us through it so lovingly and so individually paced. And so, we, between therapy and, love and prayer and gospel, we find the way to just get back on track. And if it wasn't for the camaraderie and the unconditional love that we get through And Then There Were None, even from each other. These ladies right here on this call with me, I mean, we can call each other all times of night, and I know that somebody's going to answer and will understand that I smelled something, or that I heard something. And it's the reality that we're facing for the rest of our lives. This can't be undone. We just have to find the way to be together and thank God for his mercy and his grace, and just keep utilizing everything that we can through And Then There Were None, because we'll be kind of messed up for the rest of our lives. We're just better messed up. We're less messed up than what we were before.
Amen. Well, for me, I I okay, so I went to jail for the clinic that I worked at, and for a long time, I had issues with sleeping. Um, couldn't talk to nobody. So when I finally received Abby's information, at first I was not going to call her, because the people that gave me her information, as I was trying to explain to them who I was and what I've done, because I just came home at the time, I was so vulnerable. It was like, it was a rejection. They rejected me. So I wasn't going to call Abby, but something said, and I truly believe it was God, to say, look her up. And when I looked her up and saw that she has pretty much walked in my shoes, that was the start of woosah, a thank you, a relief. I could talk to somebody. She understands. So once that happened, I became very, very, like, grateful, so thankful. I remember my first healing retreat with And Then There Were None, and it was so heavy because I've never shared my story. And I remember I felt I felt out of place, and I felt so bad and so nervous, because one of the staff members was, she was pregnant at the time, and I did not want to hurt her baby's little ears, because a baby can hear in the womb. They can hear. So, all of that was going through my mind, but I ended up sharing. And once I shared that the very first time, I said, okay. I was not judged. I was not looked at funny. Um, I just felt pure, genuine love. And I still feel that, And I always tell people, at one point, I never thought I'd be talking about what these hands have participated in, which was, evil. But I am so strong. I have a huge support system. My sister's here, you guys, the staff, and I've never felt stronger. Now, we'll say, because, Omi, she made a very good point that those moments happen. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because I get the dreams with Jacob standing there, still the same old dream, every time a day or two before I share my story. So I understand, it's the enemy's playing his games. He's trespassing. So I'm so thankful that I can pick up the phone and I can call any of y'all. I'm like, listen here, this is what's going on, And we pray, we talk it out, and tomorrow's another day. A lot of people don't have that. Mm-hmm. So I'm very thankful for ATTWN. And yes, like Omi said, we're going to be healing forever. But that's okay, because guess what? We're strong enough to be there for these newbies that are coming in.
Yeah.
So,
Adrian, I just want to share. It's funny because we all have individual relationships as well as our tribe relationship. And mine and Adrian's is really, we were the thickest we still are. But we had not physically seen each other for 4 years. So because of her, she had some restrictions on travel.
yeah, I was on
So
probation.
I wasn't trying to say that. Well, because of her
It's okay.
probation,
It's
she
okay.
couldn't travel to Florida. And I was like, I'm not going to Philadelphia. They're mean in Philadelphia. I'm from New York. So we weren't doing that, but we were patient. But no one, you couldn't pick that up because of the tightness that we had. Like, we had not been in the same state not one day in our lives for 4 years. But you could not tell me something about my sister Adrian. Like, yeah, it would get ugly. And so 4 years later, when we were able to, her probation was completed, we planned a vacation like the moment it was done. I'm sorry. And it was like the happiest moment on earth when we were it was like a Hallmark movie moment at the airport when we were just there and was able to just hug each other for the very first time. And it was crazy. And that's the kind of love and support we get from, and then there were none, like throughout, Alaska, Canada, any place. We're just like, we're united because we have this common thread, this common trauma, and we just understand and love each other.
Yeah.
Amen.
Sorry,
Yes.
Sonia. Go ahead.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. That is beautiful. Thank you. Now, how about you, Sonia, and your experience?
Gosh, even though I had told my story to our youth in our church and stuff, in my church when I first left, I did not feel the welcome and the love at first when I first left the abortion clinic. So that was shut down. It's like I was on my own, And when I found the tribe, it was totally different. It was like, oh my gosh, they're freaks like me,
Yes.
Because at first I thought it was like, when I would tell like certain people, like at work, like, I used to work with this pastor lady next to me. When I told her, even when I told her my story, I kind of sensed that she thought I was a freak because of the stories that I was telling her. Like you see these murder mystery or these murder documentaries and stuff like that. I really thought that she was that was just my thinking. Like I was a freak for doing what you did. Like who would do that? Like, is this real? And when I came to and then there were none, it was totally different. Like they did exactly what I did, and they understood me, and they weren't judging me. So that's what my day is like now. My days are like now, where I can just go back and look at my sisters, or like now seeing you guys, or to the retreats. That's what I'm live. My life is like now, and it's not easy. Um, Still, I still have those. I call them what the hell moments, but these what the hell moments are like, okay, you're good now, right? But you still think, gosh, how could you do that? How could How could you have done that? But then I think, thank you, Lord, for taking me out of this evil, heinous crimes that I did. You know, I don't wish this on anybody, and I say that with all my heart. I do not wish this on anybody. If there's a worker out there, get out now before it gets any worse.